All right, looks like we're live. Hello, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
I don't see any attendees on yet, so
TGIF.
we're talking to nobody, but let's go ahead and get this thing set up for Facebook Live.
So, happy Friday, everybody. Are people can listen to us now? Right now, we're live, right? I think we are. Okay.
We are.
While you're getting that set up, Jean, I'll just introduce us. I am Rebecca Montront of Wondersuits here in Keene. We have Dr. Jean Clerkin of Monadnock Natural Health and Allison Millar of Basic Balance of Keene. And she is a licensed acupuncturist. We have two of our colleagues, Doctors Tisa and Matt Abatelli of Cheshire Wellness, who are not with us today. They are on the road to a weekend conference of their profession. And so we wish them well. They might be listening to us if they can. And so we will miss you, Tisa and Matt, but we wish you a wonderful weekend, and hopefully you'll get some downtime as well. All right, so awesome. I'll just keep talking. We're talking today, we were saying, what do we want to talk about? And we always have a meeting like on Wednesdays saying, you know, what's on your mind? And we always all have so much on our mind, but we agreed this week we wanted to talk about some confusion when it comes to the idea of pathogens. We would think of as bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses, things like that, and how important these things actually are to our health, and how the idea of germs and hypersanitation and things like that can be really not linked in with true science. And so we kind of thought we'd talk about that. Wanted to talk about what we call stealth pathogens, which are when pathogens are allowed to live in the body in a way where they don't really appear in a visible form that can really be diagnosed, but are there kind of hidden, and they can weaken the immune system in those who are not keeping their immune system strong and cause chronic diseases. My dad was George Wrench, compound pharmacist and clinician years ago in the year 2000. I remember sitting around the pool with him and him saying, Becky, I think many of the chronic diseases we're seeing today are just bugs we're not getting at. And what he was describing there was a stealth type of pathogen. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Correct, colleagues? Yes?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting. And I think the jury's kind of out. You know, we've been talking in the past, some of the meetings that we've had here on Proactive Health Collective of Keene about terrain, you know, terrain versus germ theory, meaning if the terrain is right, the germs thrive. If the terrain isn't right, the germs aren't able to make it. But I think there does become a point where the body can become overwhelmed, and even though the original cause might be that the terrain, in other words, the body was not well enough for the immune system to keep these things intact. Once it gets to that point, and the immune system can't overcome it, then that's where intervention becomes, you know, helpful as well.
Yeah.
So. And a lot of these things that we're talking about, parasites, bacteria, they make like toxins in the body just by byproducts and biofilms. So an important part, you know, you've got to strengthen the immune system, but you've also got to open up the detox pathways. And then, yeah.
Right. So let's start with, you know, the idea that you have bacteria. What Allison, you were talking about this, you researched this recently, that there are more cells that are not you in you than there are of you. I know, yeah. I jumbled that.
No, exactly. More than half of our bodies are not us. I went on a little bit of a binge looking at this stuff the last couple of days. I just found it so fascinating. And I had known it. So most of us know that we have bacteria in our bodies and on our bodies and our skin. We have 38 trillion bacteria. 95% of it lives in our guts, and there's thousands of different types of species of it. And they've evolved with us over thousands of years through evolution. That's our microbiome. And more than half of our bodies are not us. They provide vitamins that we can't make ourselves, like B vitamins. So a lot of them will reside in the colon and the large intestine. And when we eat like complex carbs and high fiber foods, we can't actually digest that without the bacteria. And B vitamins, correct me if I'm wrong, Becky, but what I learned yesterday was B vitamins, we don't make those ourselves without the bacteria. So they're essential for the survival of us and our species. And I'll share a couple of fun facts with you too, just about bacteria. So if we didn't have bacteria on our planet, if we were to completely wipe it out, we wouldn't have any plants, because bacteria is needed to transfer and make the nitrogen a different form in the soil so that the plants can use it for photosynthesis. Also, we wouldn't have anywhere for our waste matter to go. So leaves that fall off trees, dead people, dead animals, it would all just accumulate on our planet. And also really interesting, bacteria is involved in condensing water vapor in the clouds. So without bacteria, we wouldn't have rain or snow. So cool. And
I never heard that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that part before. That's a new one for me. But you know what I have heard is that when it comes to bacteria, I think something about in the effect of 98% of all bacteria are not pathogenic to humans. So we always think of bacteria, oh my God, this enemy, but it's only a very small percentage of that, and the rest of them can be either level playing field, not harmful or not helpful, but as you were saying, many are helpful, and certainly not only to our body but helpful to the environment as well.
Yeah, it's very complex, and you're exactly right about the B vitamins, Allison, and that's why foods that are what we call, they don't contribute to health, like refined foods and things like that don't contain like the B vitamins that are supposed to be in them. Even if you're talking about refined bread versus whole wheat or something like that, we need those B vitamins to help feed our good bacteria, making our own. There are a lot of nutrients that are prebiotics that we make our own probiotics. And if we can stick with those things, we don't run into trouble in the first place. We shouldn't.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just an interesting thing that came to me in thinking about, we're talking about the microbiome and the good bacteria. A lot of that starts also with upstream with digestion and like stomach acid, acidophilus, right? So having a strong upper GI is really important for the lower GI to be functioning right and to thrive as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There was a project done by the Argonne National Laboratory, and they studied different families in their natural habitat, which obviously is like a home. So they studied the family, and they realized that each family, depending on their lifestyle, so remember we had that webinar about epigenetics, and we figured that our genome is developed largely on the decisions that we make, environmental conditions that we put ourselves in, or choices that we make with diet or household cleaners or 5G or whatever it might be. It's largely influenced by that. Well, the microbiome is also largely influenced by our environment. And so each family had a very specific microbiome with specific types of bacteria in very specific proportions. And that microbiome would take over the household and be found all over the house when they lived there. And then when they moved, another family, the project was to kind of see the differences. So another family came in, and the microbiome that was in the house was completely eradicated and replaced with the microbiome of the new family. It's so interesting. So it shows you how diversified each individual sort of microbiome is, and how much power we really have to alter it in a healthy way.
In a random just randomly reminds me of years ago. I was here. I remember reading or hearing how, you know, parents who like kiss their babies and children on the lips, their kids have much less sickness, much less ear infection, that kind of thing. And that kind of, I don't know, it sort of like seems to sort of feed into that kind of
thing. It makes sense. I mean, the whole idea that, you know, we've been, like, obviously with the whole COVID thing and the masks and all that, we've been talking about that. It's like, well, in order to have a healthy immune system, it has to do something. It has to work. It has to be involved. And if we were to successfully put ourselves in a bubble and cut ourselves off from all pathogens, would that be beneficial to us, or would it actually be detrimental to us?
Right. Oh, it would be detrimental. I mean, here, right here, this is very interesting. This paper published in, this is actually by David Perlmutter. You guys know, MD. He's wrote Brain and all that kind of stuff. He's very excellent. But this was the abstract he did. So we're talking about hygiene and the world distribution of Alzheimer's disease. So we tend to think, you know, if we just get things more sanitized, we'll all be healthier. And that's not been proven either. We find, I remember another thing about families when you are nasty, neat, washing everything in the dishwasher and everything, that your kids, they don't build their immune systems like they're supposed to. The kids are supposed to go out, they're supposed to play in the dirt, they're supposed to grab something that somebody had and just build up their system. But this was very interesting. Alzheimer's disease shares certain etiological, which would be originating features, with autoimmunity. Prevalence of autoimmunity varies between populations in accordance with variation in environmental microbial diversity. Exposure to microorganisms may improve individuals' immunoregulation in ways that protect against autoimmunity, and we suggest that this also may be the case for Alzheimer's disease. Here we investigate whether differences in microbial diversity can explain patterns of age-adjusted Alzheimer's disease rates between countries. And the conclusions were here. Variation in hygiene. Based on our analyses, it appears that hygiene is positively associated with AD risk. We would think, how is that possible? We're saying, like, being nasty neat. Being nasty neat is associated with Alzheimer's disease risk. Countries with greater degree of sanitation and lower degree of pathogen prevalence have higher age-adjusted Alzheimer's disease rates. Countries with greater degree of urbanization and wealth exhibit higher age-adjusted Alzheimer's disease rates. Conclusions and implications: variation in hygiene may partly explain global patterns in Alzheimer's disease rates. Microorganism exposure may be inversely related to AD risk. These results may help predict Alzheimer's disease burden in developing countries where microbial diversity is rapidly diminishing. Epidemiological forecasting is important for preparing for future healthcare needs and research prioritization. And again, we interfere with things we know nothing we're interfering with. And that's how we're really ruining people's health. We have an innate immune system. We have the world was put together, all of this kind of stuff. It works in a symbiotic way that is there, and we were meant to survive and thrive in it. And when we go in and we change things and we think we're making everything better, we're not. And antibiotic overuse is another huge part of that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. We were just talking about this before. You know, science is great, and we learn, but I've heard that we learn more every year than we've known in all prior years, repeatedly.
Yeah.
And, you know, so at the beginning, if you think of the timeline, okay, germ theory came along, bacteria bad, bacteria causing a problem. Then, you know, years later, they find out, oh, there's this microbiome and we actually need it. And then, you know, there's many, I was reading that viruses can be, you know, help with cleansing and, you know, as part of that symbiotic process, we think of all viruses are bad, but maybe there's a positive, maybe there's something we don't know about there. And who knows, even maybe with parasites, maybe there's actually something that has not been discovered yet. You know, we automatically assume that everything's bad and intervene in what we don't know about. So just a kind of interesting thought. But when it comes to antibiotics, you know, one of the things in relation to autoimmune disease, you know, across the board, when somebody has autoimmune disease, they generally have leaky gut, right? And that's leaky gut is essentially caused by inflammation. and different things can cause inflammation, certainly toxins and, stress and different things like that. But one of the things that can cause it is when your microbiome gets out of balance and you have these pathogenic, and they're there all the time anyway, but when you get out of balance, they take over the gut, and then they give off toxins. I think, Allison, you were talking about this before. We call them virulence factors. But these toxins that they give off, that's like their waste is like toxic chemicals, and again, leading to more inflammation, more gut breakdown. So when you bring in an antibiotic, which you might need at some point in your life, right? They can save your life, but people take them like candy, and one round of antibiotics could screw your gut up for years, and you destroy all your good bacteria. And then what it allows it to do is that the bad guys in there can take over the neighborhood. And then they start producing their toxins, and then that contributes to the inflammation in the leaky gut. And maybe that's why, that study you were mentioning or talking about, and how there's a relationship there between if we're too clean and we're not cultivating that whole immune pathogenic or bacterial microbe relationship within ourselves and the ones we come in contact with, maybe that's not the best thing for that
reason.
Had
a nice analogy, Dr. Jean, when we do our little preliminary talks on Wednesday. You had a nice analogy about something about coyotes and chickens and field mice.
Oh yeah, yeah. I heard this from this was from one of my mentors, this guy, Dr. Reggie Gold, who used to talk about this. But out in the West, it was like Arizona or something. There was the coyotes were coming and stealing, the chickens, or raiding the hen houses or whatever. And so the farmers put the bounty on all their heads, $25 a head, and they effectively wiped out the coyote population. But what they found was that then the area was overrun with field mice, and they got in and destroyed all the grain, and it would cause major problems. So then afterwards, they had to go back in and try to import coyotes back in to take care of the problem. So it's one of those things where we look at, as Becky was saying, there's this natural balance in nature. It's, many of us would think by design, but either way, there's this amazing ecosystem externally, what's going on in our environment and all the species and how everything interplays together, but also internally. And when we screw with it, we don't always know what the outcome is going to be. And if you look back at all the things that science has brought us, science is great. We have technology, we have knowledge greater than we've ever had, but yet you could argue that we've done more harm than good in some ways.
We having diversity in our microbiome of lots of different bacteria, it helps our immune systems develop, because it's really about helping them identify what's good and what's bad. And that's what the problem is with a lot of things that we see these days with modern disease. Take, for example, allergies. Our allergies are our immune systems being overactive, because it's recognizing something that's quite harmless, a bit of pollen or something, as an invader in our body. And then it's creating this whole histamine response to deal with it. Whereas it really shouldn't be a threat. And I think that maybe allergies are on the rise so much because we don't have as much diversity in our gut, and our bodies are getting confused about, okay, this is different, but it's not necessarily something I need to attack. It's not something that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So all that being said, there absolutely can be a positive relationship with microbes in our body, but they can also become to the point where they are out of balance and can cause us problems. One of the things that I notice across the board, over many years, so, sort of citing my own experience as the study here, is that when people have chronic health issues, whatever diseases they have, whether it's diabetes or, thyroid issues, or the more things they have, the more diagnoses, the more symptoms they have, when we do our analysis and get under the hood, we always find more of these stealth pathogens, more of these things causing stress on the body. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. And it's, there's two ways to look at it. One is we come from philosophy where it is the internal environment, we call it the terrain, that is, if your terrain is under stress, if your body's not healthy, then your immune system can't handle and control and keep under control this relationship. And again, some of the more pathogenic things get out of control. So that's, the first thing we want to pay attention to as especially natural health practitioners, whereas, you go to the doctor or whatever, you have a parasite, you have a this, you have a that, and they want to give you something to kill that bug without any attention paid to what was the terrain in the first place.
Right. And here's the deal. If we were living without all of the burden of toxicity, we wouldn't be having the problems we have now due to things even such as COVID, because people's immune systems are really impacted by toxins. And one I'd like to highlight is glyphosate. Okay, so think about Roundup. Okay, Roundup is a pesticide. We know it's been horrible things, causes cancer, does all kinds of things, but most people have glyphosate in their system. It's almost nearly impossible not to. But this was written by a researcher at MIT, 12 years on this kind of thing. And this is just brief, but he says, researchers from Wuhan, China, have done a careful study of 4 patients who suffered from an acute reaction to COVID-19 and ultimately died. These patients all had severe issues with insufficient oxygen supply due to pneumonia. They also exhibited deficiency in immune function in terms of decreased counts of various types of immune cells. Notably, they all suffered from gut dysbiosis with underrepresentation of bifidobacteria and lactobacillus and disproportionate overrepresentation of pathogens such as Corynebacterium and Ruthenibacterium. They also had a fungus infection with an overgrowth of Aspergillus. This pattern of gut dysbiosis is in accord with what my colleagues and I have observed in association with glyphosate exposure in animal studies. This is huge, because where you see all of this glyphosate really congregated is in those major urban areas, New York City, New Orleans, where all this was in all of the diesel fuel and all of that stuff that just people are just breathing in constantly. So we're not just dealing with, okay, here we are, is it germ versus host, is it this, is it that? We now have toxins that are totally decimating our immune systems. And most people have no idea whether they're in that group or they're not. And so that's why, people say, can't I just get my nutrients from the foods I eat? No, you can't, because you're going to have to use nutrients in a therapeutic way. You're going to have to use nutrients in a very aggressive, offensive way to protect yourself. And that's what we have to do. We're not in the Garden of Eden. This is not the Garden of Eden.
That's true. And yeah, just on that note, if you think about the food supply isn't as nutrient dense as it used to be based on the farming methods.
Not at all, no.
Most people are not eating, they think they're eating well, but they're really not. I mean, I always ask people like, well, how many people eat liver anymore? And I never get, nobody ever raises their hand, right? So there's habits, there's the food supply, and so we're not dealing from a level playing field. And then again, you add in these toxins. It isn't just about a virus or whatever trying to get away from that. It's really looking at the big picture and the overall health. And that's why some people can get a virus and they don't even know they have it, and it doesn't affect them at all in that way. And other people, it could be the end of them. And that's all based on these other factors that we're talking about. And I guess the point would be that, well, it's great to, maybe to pay attention to this virus, but it's also it would make more sense to start looking at the overall terrain of our health and how we are.
Some of us are we just feel fine. We don't feel under threat. I'm one of those people. I just know my immune system, and I know if I get exposed to COVID and I get it, I'll be fine. I don't have any question about that. So I don't feel like I'm living in a world that's any more germ dangerous than it ever was. And we can't worry about every single pathogen that comes along, because there's going to be another one. After this one, there'll be another one. What are we going to do? We're going to all continue wearing face masks. And so, yeah, we have to have the confidence to know we have control. I know how to deal with my body so that I have a shield. That's my mask. I don't need a face mask. I need the shield of my immune system. And
viruses are, you know, the word virus now has become a very, very scary thing. And we've been talking about bacteria and microbiomes, but I only recently learned, and so maybe a lot of you would not know, that we have a virome. And so we actually have a whole system of viruses that live in our bodies. And there's a paper published that said we have 380 trillion in viruses that inhabit us, but they're not infecting us. What they do is they infect the bacteria that's within us. And what's really, and like Dr. Jean was saying, we can use these viruses to help us. And there's a whole type of therapy being investigated now. It's called phage therapy. And what they're doing is, because viruses will infect certain types of bacteria, they're going to start to use viruses to ideally target the specific type of bacteria that you need help with. So say you have a strep infection, you would use a virus to target that strep. And that way you're not using an antibiotic that's going to destroy your entire microbiome. So yeah, it's really interesting. Viruses might not actually be our enemy at all.
Yeah.
A couple
That's one thing I love about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share what it might be a little bit out there, but there's some really cool stuff about viruses that hopefully we'll learn in the coming years. Well, first of all, 8% of our DNA is actually viruses, because there's types of viruses called retroviruses, and they go in and they take out our DNA and replace it with their own DNA. So we're 8% viruses. Not only are half of our bodies not actually us, but 8% of our DNA is viral. And then there's a protein called hemo, which is found in the blood of pregnant women, and it's involved in the formation of the placenta. And this is believed to be viral in nature. And then the thing that might be a little bit out there, but there's a study, and I had her credentials, I don't know them, but her name is Alyssa Pastusan. And she is arguing that the genetic code that's responsible for consciousness, for thinking and analyzing the way that we as humans do, is actually came from a virus that when it inhabited a human, it switched forms in order to take advantage of the pathways of information exchange along the nervous system. So maybe the very fact that we can think and analyze is due to a virus. Pretty cool.
It's amazing.
It's hard.
It's amazing. And, you know, it's the one area, like when I think about like modern science, that being the direction we should go in, is like, how do we use the knowledge, the technology, the ability to learn more things to actually become more in tune with the natural balance of what happens in the environment and our internal environments, versus like always being science, always having to be this outside in, aggressive, kill the enemy kind of thing.
Well, it's like looking, Western medicine and everything really in the Western culture, they look like in and get more specific. And that's why there's all these specialties. And if you go to a physician, you know, for a hormonal problem, you have to go to, you know, somebody that deals with your hormones. And if you have a kidney problem, you have to go to someone that deals with your kidneys. But if we can start expanding our views and have more of an attitude like we don't know and we're exploring, I think that's just such a richer way to learn.
Yeah. And I just experienced that again with somebody this week who's been her whole life long, you know, in her 30s now, her whole life long with all kinds of disparate problems. And I mean, as I was able to sit and spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours with her, I mean, it became apparent to me that she has a severe connective tissue disorder. But that is the kind of thing, and I think I've talked about that before, but I mean, okay, so you've got hernias, so you go to see the person for that. You have SVT, you go to see the person for that. You have headaches, you go to see the person for that. You have cardiovascular issues or something. And all of these things, if you look at them and you analyze them, you might have depression and things like that. And we can see those kinds of things as being manifestations of manifestations of connective tissue disorder. And yet, all of those different things will send somebody to a different specialist in the mainstream medicine world, and never the two will talk, never the three or the four will talk, and nobody will ever, you know, go, oh, wow, look at that. And that's how people just really get lost, and they get patronized, and they just become a problem to people because nobody really knows what to do. And it's sad. Now, I did want to bring up one other thing. So we're talking about what are the things that make pathogens more dangerous to us, say COVID. And I talked about this on my radio program many weeks ago. And nobody wants to hear this. And, you know, this kind of thing is all being censored out of the media. So if we talk about glyphosate, then you have a greater risk of having a problem with COVID. You know, mainstream doesn't want you to hear that. They want you to hear their song and dance. The other one is 5G. So a lot of people don't know what 5G is. They just think, oh, well, you're a conspiracy kind of person, and you just think you're just worried about technology. I love technology. I would be lost without technology. So I'm the last person to not want the best technology. But 5G rollout did absolutely coincide with the big explosion of COVID. And it says, could it be that 5G oxidized important surveillance proteins of the innate immune system of the Wuhan population? Does 5G cause severe inflammation, damaging the innate immune system? Could it be that 5G does cause DNA breaks, as documented by scientists? Do these DNA breaks potentially affect innate immune molecules, such as the mannose-binding lectins, which are primarily located on lung surfactant proteins A and D? And I won't go into the whole thing, but you have to say, we see a virus, you know, emerge. Maybe it's a new variety of a virus. Coronaviruses are ancient, and, you know, we all have been exposed to them. We probably would, most of us would test positive for COVID just because of that. But you add in things like glyphosate exposure, you add in things like 5G, and all of the things that these do, and they also do produce what are known as exosomes, which appear like viruses in microbiology. So there's a huge confusion, and yet we're just being told this is a virus, it's contagious, wear your mask, keep your distance, and that's sad.
Yeah. Doing a study can't, let alone who's funding the study, that's another conversation altogether. But a study can't take all of the factors into consideration, whether it's 5G and the glyphosate, all the toxins that you're getting from your environment. You can't study that and publish, okay, there's a correlation. Like, it's common sense, and it's like Chinese medicine. It was developed over thousands of years by observing nature. And that's why it works so incredibly well. And it explains literally everything in not only our bodies and our lives, our lifestyles, our relationships, our health, but also in the cosmos, in the universe. And it's developed by observation. It's not saying, I know this, so I'm going to fund this study, and we're going to find this out, and I'm going to pay you to find this out. It just doesn't. I love science, but you have to take it for what it is and not put all of your eggs in that basket.
Yeah, we've got this sort of sentiment, I think, in society, like the religion of science, where, you know, people bow down and take it like it's the be end all end all. And I'm totally for science, but like, as you said, Allison, you know, who's doing the science? And when you talk about, we talked about placebo effect a little bit, but even the observer can affect the outcome, you know, the scientists doing it. So there's, and we always have new information coming out and finding, oh, well, this research study proved this, but a later research study, when we had more information, now actually shows something different. It happens over and over and over again. And it's great to have science, but you do have to balance that with maybe your practical observations. And, you know, so when somebody comes in to me, and so we work with people over and over and over again, and are able to get great results. And somebody come in and say, well, that's not scientific. I don't give a crap if it's scientific. People get better. You can tell me all the science you want, but I know what's happening in my office is people come in, we go through these protocols, and they get better every single time. That's science. Science is repeatable, knowing the outcome.
Yeah. just when I was getting ready for this, and I'm not like patting myself on the back, but I had a guy in, he's had, you know, major problems with his anger and stuff like that, and plaque psoriasis and all this stuff. And he's like, I'm doing great. He goes, look at my psoriasis is all gone. Look at that. It's just gone. And I'm fine. I'm having some stuff going on in my life, and it's not good. And I've got, you know, all this stuff that's going on out there. And he says, and I'm fine. I'm even. I'm not resorting to my old behaviors of how I deal with that kind of thing. And so when you see that kind of thing, I say it is all based in science applied. Knowledge applied is wisdom, and how you kind of like do that. But that's what we're doing. That's the kind of results we're seeing. And we're getting better results again. Why? Because we are able to listen to people. We're able to spend the time with them. We're able to bring many more tools in than what the AMA allows to their mainstream kind of, you know, puppets, because you can't really think creatively if you're in the mainstream medicine thing, because that would be outside of the standard of care. So we have a lot better, we have many more things to work with. And sometimes that might include allopathic, it might include medications or things like that when appropriate, but we can then use and employ other methodologies that they are not able to. And so that's really huge.
Sure. On that note, if you'd all indulge me a little bit, I was thinking about sharing some of like how we detect these stealth pathogens.
Yeah,
you know,
I want to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I use kinesiology as one of the methods that we use to get information about what's happening in the body. And it's kind of like, and Allison, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but you have energy channels in the body, right, in acupuncture? And do you read the pulse to feel if that energy is strong or weak? Is that correct?
Yeah. Right. That in combination with questions and looking at the tongue are the major ways we can figure out what energy channels are blocked.
Yep,
yeah.
You use all the information you can, but one of them is that you feel energy, right? You're noticing, yeah. And so we kind of do the same thing, and we use a muscle test. So I'll actually, you know, like put a little pressure, and it's not like a strength test, but I can just feel like that feels solid or not. And as we go around the body to different either acupuncture points or organ reflexes, if you hit one that's under stress, you'll feel the energy waver. And then so you know that there's a stress or weakness there. And then we can use the concept of vibration to gain information. And so every substance based on its molecular structure has a unique vibration. So mercury, you know, from a molecular standpoint, vibrates differently than does aluminum, than does lead, than does wheat, than does corn. And so when you go through and you can check all the areas of the body, you can see what's under stress, and then you can use these what we call kinesiology kits, and I'll kind of show one here. And it has these vials in them, and they all have in them the vibrations of these particular things. These happen to be foods. Over here, we happen to have microbes. So we have bacterial, viral, parasitic, and fungal. And we also have these little things here. They're called virulence factors, like we talked about before. So it enables us to go through and literally figure out what areas are under stress and why they're under stress. And, you know, typically, like I said, with most people with any kind of chronic health issues, I don't want to say most people, it's 100% of the time. There's an inverse relationship between health and the amount of pathogens that are in a person's body. And I've used the examples like, and then, you know, and again, we have bacteria and pathogens with us all the time. It's when they start to take over and become pathogenic and start to produce problems. But as that goes up, our health goes down, and there's a break point. They call it death, right? Most people, when they die, they don't die of cancer. They die of an infection, right? When the body finally, the immune system finally becomes overwhelmed and those pathogens take over, they call it death. And that's what happens, like you were saying, a dog on the side of the road doesn't just stay there. It goes away because, you know, the bacteria, viruses, funguses, and parasites take care of it. And so one of the neat things we have is this thing here. It's a Lyme kit. And so it has this little vial right here is Borrelia burgdorferi, and that's the classic Lyme. But what we find is that, and when we check people, I'm going to tell you this straight up, it's right around 40% of the people we check, we find this vibration present. And once you do, we also find that if somebody got bit by a tick, we'll find that one, you know, around the site of the bite. And if you get it right away, that's kind of all you find, and you find it in that area. As time goes on, and then when you get into it with people with chronic health challenges, especially autoimmune challenges, we'll find 4 to 6 other ones in different areas of the body as well. So just kind of cool stuff. It just enables you to really to get a little deeper and to figure out, to find stuff that you wouldn't normally be able to find by a blood test or a hair test.
I have to advertise. Dr. Jean is going to be on my radio show tomorrow. Wonders Roots Your Health from the Ground Up. I will be interviewing him. Maybe you should bring your kit. Maybe you can like put some of those things in front of me and see what happens. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of hard to keep you can't have dead air, so you can't like just be off. But I want you to talk about that. So Dr. Jean tomorrow, WKBK, whatever, on my radio show tomorrow, WKBK at noon. I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Jean. I'm going to be finding out where he comes from, what got him into this kind of occupation, where all your background. I'm just going to get to ask you any question I want, and you have to answer.
Awesome. I love it. On the hot seat.
It's gonna be fun. Yeah.
That's going to be.
Anyway, I just brought that up because it's just an interesting thing. A lot of people are walking around and there's a mystery. You go to your medical doctors and there's just this mystery, like they have no idea what's happening and they can't really get answers. And so it's just a way to really hone in on like, here's what's happening. Again, in the context being of, like one of the things I think it's amazing. I can't remember the last time somebody didn't have this problem, but not having enough stomach acid, right? All those people with acid reflux, and what it is, it's really hypoacidosis. It means there's not enough acid, and because there's not enough acid, we don't digest our foods quickly and properly and move them through the next chamber. They sit there, putrefy, and begin to bubble up into the esophagus, right? And so there's a couple of manifestations or problems with that. Obviously there's this discomfort, and if that acid is getting into the throat, that can cause problems and potential throat cancer and stuff later. And so the medical answer to that is to douse the acid, right? The problem with that answer is that when you don't have enough acid, you don't digest your proteins properly, and then you have rotting, undigested proteins moving through you. You can't break free from your foods, things like calcium, magnesium, zinc, those nutrients that you need. So, and if you open a physiology book, you'll see these all over the place. Every process that happens requires these nutrients, right? And the other thing to bring it back to what we're talking about is that that acid in the stomach provides a barrier to many of the pathogens that are going to come in. This is the way they're going to get in, right?
Exactly.
And they're coming in that alimentary canal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we don't have enough acid, they can slip through and make it to the next chamber, which they love, like the small intestine and the large gut, which are, very much a nicer environment for them. So just some things to think about, like how these things happen. So everybody is, I'm going to say everybody, just about everybody's walking around with not enough stomach acid. And there are these pathogens, these things like these parasites and stuff, if we're going to talk about that, are all over the place. They're in our food, they're in our water supply, they're everywhere. So we're constantly taking these things in. And again, the body, if everything's working properly, is designed to handle that. Right. It's when the systems start to break down that these things start to manifest. And now the way the body can normally handle these things, it starts to become overwhelmed. Then those things begin to take over. And I think, Allison, you mentioned before, once they get embedded in there, they create these things called biofilms. And biofilms, an example of biofilm would be like plaque on your teeth. You ever notice that, like, you got to go to the dentist, they got to take these like tools to try to get this plaque off because it's so strong. So this happens inside the body too, like in the gut and in different areas of the body. These biofilms are created, and so it can be challenging and difficult to get these things handled. You go through, you take some herbs or whatever, and you hope that you got it, but they literally, if you go to, I posted this thing on my Facebook page and my business Facebook page probably a week or two ago, but it basically was a look with a scope on the inside of a intestinal wall. And it shows you all these parasites that are sort of buried in there that, are kind of protected from the immune system.
Yeah. Really, I like to describe to my clients exactly what you just said. Okay, if there's not enough stomach acid, number one, okay, you've got the gateway from the esophagus to the stomach, which is the lower esophageal sphincter. And I tell people, think of this as like a guard. And when there's not enough stomach acid, the guard doesn't want to close that door tightly. So that remains floppy. Now you're supposed to have a pH of about 1 or 2 in the stomach. And that's supposed to reduce your stomach contents at that point to a consistency called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E. And the small intestine, if that doesn't happen because you don't have enough acid, the small intestine doesn't want you. It's like the pyloric sphincter, the guard to the pyloric sphincter to the small intestine is saying out, 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 out. So people feel full for a long time after they eat. But fine, and the food starts to, begin to ferment, like Dr. Jean said. But finally, the guard has to open the gate. I mean, you have to do that. But now you've got food that needed acid to be digested that's coming into the small intestine that now the pancreatic juices are all going to turn this alkaline. And those nutrients that, like zinc, like Dr. Jean was saying, things like that, that have to need the acid to be absorbed, that's not happened. So now you have you're fermenting food in here that's not properly fixed for the small intestine, and you're fermenting gas, and you're having all of this bloating and indigestion, and you're not absorbing your nutrients properly. And the stomach acid is so important and so critical, and most people don't make enough. And one of the reasons for that is iodine deficiency, believe it or not, because iodine is really important for the formation of stomach acid in the first place. So it's a big problem, but digestion is key.
Yeah, and as you're speaking about this, Becky, it just kind of, it really speaks to the idea that when we're looking at the body and approaching the body in any capacity as a practitioner, as far as trying to advance health, if we don't take that bigger picture, and I think Allison, you mentioned this as well, if we don't step back and look at the bigger picture of what's happening here, we become tunnel vision, like it's all about this bug or this parasite or this stealth pathogen. And it is, like, you do maybe need to pay some attention to that, but you always want to go upstream. That's a concept we talk about a lot in our practices. We always want to go upstream. Like, what happened to cause this issue? What happened to cause that issue? And, so that's where you start looking at your environment and whether or not you're getting the proper nutrients and whether you can properly digest those things. But any real effective and long-term approach has to be comprehensive in looking at all the different pieces and how they fit together and making sure that all of the chains along the fence are intact, because any break along that line messes up the whole system.
Yeah. You work with digestion a lot, Allison, I'm sure. That's huge for you in acupuncture.
Yeah. And, if someone comes in with, they've been diagnosed with Lyme or whatnot, it's no matter what it is, back pain, insomnia, no matter what it is, it's their treatment is very specific to the presentation of what's going on. And that'll often change day to day when they come in as well. So I'll work with digestion when it seems like it's necessary, but sometimes the digestive system is showing up as the most symptoms. You check in with the pulse, the liver's the one that needs the most help. And then once you strengthen the liver or sedate the liver, whatever's going on, then the digestive system starts to let up. So it's really a different language, and it's not, you just work with what you see and it works. You just balance it out. And that's why I love it so much, because I love that you guys do your job, and like Dr. Jean, you can specifically see, okay, this is a vibration that you have. And then I'll ask, what information can you give me? And it's really helpful, but at the end of the day, it doesn't always really matter if they have Lyme disease or not. We're going to meet their body wherever it is, and their body knows what to do. It's kind of like you're giving their body strength, and the body is amazing. It knows what to do with it. And that's the reason why I can treat people with cancer. I don't treat cancer itself, but we treat the person that has cancer. And when you give that immune system a boost, their body knows that it's strengthening the innate immune system. It's not strengthening the cancer cells to continue replicating. It has this wisdom. There's actually this point on the leg, stomach 36. It's incredible point for immunity, for digestion, very grounding point. It's the earth on earth channel. And in studies, they have shown that it increases white blood cells. But if you do the same studies on people that have autoimmune conditions, they'll show the reverse happens on the blood tests. because they have an overactive immune system. So doing the same point on 2 different people will produce different results. And a lot of people say it works on the endocannabinoid system, in that same sort of just like, it just gets the body to homeostasis. I don't really know how, but
Well, no, it works.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Awesome. You know, it kind of reminds me, I think we were talking about this a little bit about prion theory versus germ theory. You know, way back, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. But, you know, again, with the Lyme, what we see is if it's quick, if it's initial, you know, something they just got bit or something, and we detect something there. But when it's been chronic Lyme, there always seems to be these other co-infections. And where did they come from? You know, like, did they come in after the fact? Did they come in at the same time? Or did these things actually morph and become different things based on the environment that they're in?
We know that bacteria morphology exists. I mean, it's just really diabolical when you think about it. It's pretty creepy. But we also know that a lot of times people can have these pathogens in their bodies and not even be aware and not be sick. One example is the evidence showing that the Gardasil series, the HPV vaccine, which especially in people with the HBLA, something genetic defect or whatever, really wreaks havoc with the immune system. And so you'll have people who, you know, young people, you know, mom, did you know? Dad, did you know? I mean, the risk of cervical cancer is like one of our least concerning cancers, and HPV is not an issue in like 99% of people who have it, and you can use glutathione and ellagic acid to deal with it. It's ridiculous, but we have all of our young people going through this horrible series of vaccines, and I've seen horrible outcome from that. We call it the Gardasil syndrome. But one of them is all of a sudden I have Lyme disease. I have Bartonella, which is cat scratch fever, which is one of the co-infections. So what has happened is your immune system has been so messed with, for a kind word, with this assault of this vaccine series, that now your immune system no longer keeps those pathogens in check. You were fine. You were infected. You had no idea. You were holding it. You were fine. And now, you know, all you know what breaks loose. And it's a crime. It's a real crime, because we're making people, we're disrupting their immune systems. Your immune system knows what to do. Just strengthen it, keep it strong. It knows how to handle all this stuff around you. Pretty sad.
Yeah, I'm sure you're the same, but I probably spend at least half my time trying to fix the problems that some of these invasive procedures have caused with people. You know, where they didn't know what to do, they didn't have the answers at the time, they didn't have help, and they sought out whatever help they could get, and you know, landed up causing more harm really than good.
It makes our jobs a lot more difficult when someone's on a lot of medication or has done a lot of different types of intervention. Not that, you know, your body can't get over it, but it's the diagnosis, at least in the pulses, becomes very murky. And oftentimes with patients that are on medication, I'll give a treatment and then check back in on the pulse 10, 15 minutes later, and then it finally clears up and it shows me what's actually going on. But you almost have to get to this certain level to like get the...
Right, it's so bogged up with stuff that you're not even getting a clear reading, so you have to sort of take off a layer in order to see what's really going on underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally see that as well.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Becky.
I was just going to say, when we talk about what is a stealth pathogen, so in the idea of pathophysiology or whatever, you have the acute phase. You get infected with something, you mount a fever, your white blood cell count rises, you fight it, you know, you have that kind of thing. Then you can have like a subclinical infection, which is, okay, you had mono, now you have like Epstein-Barr virus in your body or something, but it's subclinical. It's just like, or the herpes viruses, they're there, but they're not causing problems, right? Until maybe you get older and your immune system weakens and now you have shingles because, you know, you haven't kept your immune system strong, and now these things that are sort of subclinical and hidden are coming out. They have opportunity. So again, The answer is always the same: keep the immune system strong. You need to pay attention to it. You need to not just think that you're going to do that naturally if you don't feed your body right, if you don't make the proper changes in your lifestyle and things to do that. And again, we're in a hostile environment, so it takes more care than it might have, many years ago. But then you come to this level known as the stealth level that is recently coming to the forefront. At the lowest level, microorganisms are normally undetectable by regular laboratory tests or by the immune system. They exist in the body unrecognized as a negative foreign entity. The body therefore does not mount an active defense response. The organism is still active, however, secreting toxins, like you were saying, Allison, in minute amounts. These toxins affect the body's physiology and generally weaken the body, allowing other organisms to invade opportunistically. Common signs and symptoms are extremely subtle and often have no apparent connection to what is generally acceptable as signs of infection. They include worsening allergies, recurrent sinusitis, autoimmune disease, chronic diarrhea, brain fog, rash, anemia, delayed inflammation, food intolerance, and hormonal imbalance. So all of these things. So we see these pathogens working at different levels, and at that stealth level can be super hard to get to the bottom of what's going on.
Awesome. Yeah. So I hear two basic principles here. One, a lot of these things, and we see this again because you can, and when you're checking different organs, like in the thyroid, we find the same pathogen. What's interesting is we find the same pathogens there repeatedly in particular organs. Like there's this one category that we show in the thyroid, and then certain other organs, there are tendencies towards specific types of things that show up. So there's something to do with the environment there. But on the side of like, what can we do? And if there, and Allison, you mentioned this before, there are so many ways that you can intervene in the body, and the body is so amazing that if you get the energy flowing using acupuncture, it's enough to get enough momentum where it can kick into gear. If you can give it the right herb that might help support some part of the mechanism along that immune response line, it can kick things in enough to get the body going. If you have less stress, if you eat a little better, like all of these things somewhere along the line can have an influence on how the body's responding, and can be enough to kick us off in the right direction. And obviously the more that you do of these things in a healthy lifestyle, obviously the better chance you have of overcoming these things. And like I would say, just the other little thing is that if you could just have a way to know what you're dealing with and to be able to track it and to see that the things that you're doing are successful, it's just a really nice little extra tool to have. So
yeah, that can go just that you're making progress. And also, keep in mind that Western medicine and our interventions that we have now, they're fairly recent. I mean, in the last couple hundred years, if that, but our bodies have thousands of years of knowledge. We've evolved in order to know what to do. So to think that we know what to do is, a little bit of an ego trip, to a whole other power here that's underlying everything.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We just have to listen to it. I do like to use, I love monolaurin coconut oil. So this is something Big Pharma knows about, is known about for a long time, that monolaurin, lauric acid, caprylic acid that come from coconut oil will kill all of the lipid-coated virus bacteria. We're talking HIV. They know this. They cannot patent anything that comes from it. And so we could be curing so much disease from these pathogens. A list of, because monolaurin, from coconut oil has the same molecular structure as the biofilm surrounding the bacteria and lipid-coated virus bacteria and fungi. When they encounter one another, the virus, bacteria, or fungi spill out and die. And Bruce Fife, who wrote The Coconut Miracle, talks about a guy with full-blown HIV, very high viral load, and he was kind of told to get his affairs in order. He went down to the Amazon, and he lived among people, and they were using coconut as a big part of their medicine and a big part of their food. And he put on his 35 pounds he had lost. He He felt great. He went back. His viral load was under 2,000, which means you can't convey it, you know, through contact or whatever. And he went on. He was fine. We know this. We know Big Pharma covers it up because there is no money in it. But of the viruses, even Hep C. Okay, so viruses: HIV or HIV-1, 6 Visna herpes simplex virus, HVS 1 and 2, vesicular stomatitis virus, measles virus, rubella virus, Epstein-Barr, respiratory syncytial virus, influenza virus, dengue virus, leukemia virus, cytomegalovirus, some leaky forest virus, lymphocytic choriomeningitis, human papillomavirus, HPV, pneumovirus, bacteria, gram-positive organisms, gram-negative organisms, bacillus anthrax, chlamydia, listeria, gonorrhea, staphylococcus, H. pylori, groups A, B, F, and G, streptococci, mycoplasma, streptococcus, blah, 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 these things you have, mycobacteria, Clostridium perfringens, and yeast fungi and molds, Aspergillus, Niger, Malaysia species, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, Penicillium subtilis, ringworm, Rutinia, Candida, Utilis, a number of protozoa like Giardia are also inactivated or killed by monolaurin. This is huge. So, and this is a super inexpensive supplement. It's something that, you know, you can take to help overcome these things. And, you know, I use them for people with herpes cold sores or genital lesions or things like that and other things. But this is huge, but you don't know about this because there's no money in it. And that's exactly why you don't know about it. Precisely.
There you have it.
Yeah.
So awesome discussion today. Encourage all you people at home to check it out on Facebook or YouTube. We have the Proactive Health Collective of Keene YouTube channel. We have, you know, each of our, there's also a Facebook for that, Proactive Health Collective of Keene. And then each of us, I think, has also streamed this to our Facebook pages, you know, Monadnock Natural Health, Wondrous Roots, and I always forget Basic Balance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Basic Balance.
So check those out. You could share those with your friends on those platforms. And I don't know, anybody have anything else they want to wrap up before we?
Just thanks everybody for being here, and thank you, Dr. Jean and Allison. That was really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much. I had a great time, and looking forward to next week. Our Dr. Zabatelli will be back with us, and I'm looking forward to my interview on your radio program tomorrow.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, everybody tune in tomorrow, WKBK here in Keene, and WKBKradio.com. I'll be interviewing Dr. Jean and getting all the skinny on his background and what he's up to.
Look out. All the things you didn't want to know. All right. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.